I managed to read 13 books this month. Let's chat about it. I want to keep this intro short and sweet, but I managed to read a lot because Ontario is in lockdown number 3 because our premier is an idiot. So I had the opportunity to read a lot more audiobooks, especially when I was working. So this is the result. I have 3 rereads, which was unexpected but really fun. And a lot of these books I don't have incredibly strong feelings on, so hopefully I can keep this to a decent chunk of time, but we'll see. The first book I finished in April was The Night Masquerade by Nnedi Okorafor. This is Binti number 3. I'm glad to finally have finished out this novella trilogy. The first book follows Binti, who is the first person to leave her community, to leave to space, to travel to a university, and then things go horribly wrong. Where the story ends versus where we start is really interesting, and overall I actually liked this series of novellas. This is going to be a trilogy that a lot of people are split on. For the most part, I was satisfied with it. There's a specific trope in the last book as well that I think a lot of people won't like, but I wasn't mad at it for reasons that I can't get into. I liked Binti's arc over the course of the trilogy. Her growth was honestly pretty incredible. Some of the plot related stuff I didn't like. It's a novella, so there shouldn't be a lot of retconning of plot details, and that happened, so that kind of marred my enjoyment of it. Overall, I think I gave it 4 stars, 3.5 stars. I did enjoy it. Content warnings include, because I already forgot to mention them, death, genocide, and gun violence. The next book I completed was Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. Content warnings include discussions of racism and discrimination, slavery, police brutality, and death. This is nonfiction about this one woman who wrote an article with the same title, and it went super viral and people were really, really mad at her for multiple different reasons. She then has spent the rest of her career discussing racism with white people, and that's why this book was written. This specifically centers and talks about racism in the UK, which I found interesting and was ignorant to. I will say though, the first section of the book really, really made me nervous because it reads like a textbook. It details the history of British racism and it like a textbook, and that took me a while to read and I was concerned. Luckily, the rest of it balances research and anecdotal stuff, which I appreciated a lot. And I knew I was going to love this book after the author starts dunking on Lena Dunham. I'll always appreciate a good read of Miss Lena. I think this is a very valuable read. I'm not going to say I enjoyed my time with it, but it is something worth reading, in my opinion. As always, I don't give nonfiction ratings. I then went and completed Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and I'm very happy to say I enjoyed this significantly more than Born. Annihilation follows this group of 4 women entering this Area X that basically nobody ever returns from, and they are set to study it, but they don't really know why. There's also a movie for this one that I haven't watched. I meant to watch it after reading the book and totally forgot. Content warnings for Annihilation include death, murder, body horror, and mentions of abuse/spousal abuse. I was scared to read this because I didn't really like Born. I didn't like the writing style. I didn't love the story. It didn't work for me. This one worked better, but wasn't a favorite by any means. I liked the mystery surrounding the story as a whole. I liked discovering more and things getting weirder and weirder. That stuff was cool. The pacing is not great. At first I thought it was paced fantastically, but there is a definite lull and definite chunk in the middle that just wasn't necessary to the story. It was so weirdly put in there, just strange. I didn't love the characters, but that's definitely a writing choice because you're supposed to be removed from the characters themselves. I thought this was an interesting time. I'm interested to see the continuation of the series, I gave this 3.5 stars. I then finally read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a book I've been putting off for years just because of the way people talk about it. This is the story of Achilles told through Patroclus, his lover's eyes, and it's a really beautiful Greek tragedy that I did love it. I knew I was gonna love it. I love Circe by Madeline Miller. Content warnings for this include rape and sexual assault, death, homophobia, war, violence, and gore. I listened to the audiobook, whose narration I thought was fantastic. And this was an interesting experience because I expected to bawl my eyes out, and I didn't shed a tear, which is interesting because I'm a crier. I think this is beautifully written. The prose itself is just gorgeous, and I love the way the story was constructed. This is basically their love story and the downfall of their love story. So Greek things are happening in the background, but it's really focused on the two of them. It's way more of an insular, you know what I mean, condensed character focused story than I was expecting, which I should have known with the way Circe was written. I really loved them, and the progression of their story definitely made me sad. It was a bummer, but I do think the ending was the teeniest bit more hopeful than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be a straight up misery fest, and the circumstances behind why things go down was deeply upsetting, but I did love it. I gave it 5 stars. Madeline Miller has my whole heart, and I'm highly anticipating when she writes another book. All right, I then did a reread of Windwitch. I've been rereading one Witchlands book a month to continue on with the series. Book number 4 is coming out. I'm excited, and I like this more upon reread. I do have a review for it if you're interested. I'll have it linked down below, but a lot of it has sat higher in my feelings than my first time around. The one plot thread with Merrick, if you've read the series, I do think drags, but I liked it better this time. Content warnings for Windwitch include disfigurement, injury, misgendering, suicide, off the page, and injury, harm, violence. My back is already starting to hurt, and I've gotten through 4 books. Okay. So that's why I don't sit on the floor. I absolutely love the friendship in here still. It brings me a lot of joy. I'm still not convinced. I keep intending to read reviews on the trans rep in here. I don't know how well it's handled. I think Susan Denner did it to the best of her ability with how she set up the story, but I think there could have been tweaks to the story in general to make the rep a little bit better, but that's just conjecture on my part. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, a bump up from my first rating, and I'm very excited to finally read Blackwaters for the first time. I feel like I'm getting through these quickly, but I'm probably wrong. I then read Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. This is a contemporary romance between a fan fiction writer, both are fan fiction writers, and one of them is starring in the show that they both write about, and the other main character posts a picture of herself in cosplay, and the internet gets mad because she's fat, and then said actor asks her on a date without knowing who she is. I did enjoy this. I thought I was going to, but it was way too fanficky for me. Just talking about the fan fiction of this world was too much. Sometimes they talk about it in how they relate to one another, and it was just too much because it's a fictional world that we don't know about, and the romance itself I did enjoy. Every time I had a quibble about how one of them conducted themselves, it was actually directly addressed when they were learning to change and realizing what they had done wrong, and I was like, all right, Miss Olivia, you got me. And I forgot the content warnings because I suck. Content warnings include body shaming, fat phobia, parental abuse, and child abuse. I did like the fat rep in here. I really liked how April conducts herself and has grown over the years and kind of rebukes what her parents try and force on her. That stuff I thought was really well handled. It was a good fun time. Oh, I forgot. I also felt the length of this romance book. I think it's just 400 pages, and you kind of felt it, especially for a romance. Like, we could have picked up the pace a little bit, but I gave this overall 4 stars. Ugh, I'm bummed about this next book. It just didn't personally work for me, and that's Blackwaters Sister by Zen Cho. This was an arc I was approved for on NetGalley, and I think it's coming out mid-May. This follows a girl who recently graduated Harvard, who's moving back to Malaysia with her parents. She is sort of kind of unsure with what she wants to do and her path in life, and then she realizes she's being haunted by her dead grandmother, who has a score to settle with a mob boss. That pitch is fantastic. Unfortunately, just the story itself, the plot wasn't interesting to me. It didn't go in directions I thought were particularly very interesting, so I'm a little disappointed. Content warnings for this include homophobia, racism, colorism, cancer/medical issues. I thought the themes and things discussed in here were actually fantastically well done and explored, specifically regarding her culture and her queerness and how they intersect and how they don't, and just even identity outside of that, like who she's going to be as a person, what's she going to do with the rest of her life. All that stuff I thought was really relatable and interesting, and I really liked the topics discussed there. The plot itself, though, was just boring or uninteresting to me. You'd think trying to take down a mob boss was really cool, but the story itself just was focused on like a lot of back and forth and kind of traveling, and the grandmother not being honest about things. The element of gods, which I love. I love everything godly, was pretty disappointing to me. I personally would have liked the story to lean in either way, more to the godly mythical stuff or more of like the mob boss taking him down, because both of them together just weren't really cohesive, or they didn't feel fully developed on their own, so mixing them together just wasn't very exciting. I liked the main character a lot. I thought her arc was overall pretty satisfying. I didn't have any thoughts really on the writing. I think it lacked a bit of description at times. I would have liked if it maybe leaned into the atmosphere of the story a little bit more, and I also found myself really enjoying the setting with it being in Malaysia. This was one I'm really split on, so I ended up giving the frustrating rating of 3 stars. I wanted to like it a lot more than I did, but I don't think it's a bad book. I just don't think it was a book for me. A book I absolutely loved was You Bring the Distant Near by Maitali Perkins. I listened to the audiobook. I also forgot to mention I listened to the audiobook of Windwitch, but anyway, I think this is such a fantastic story. It is a multi-generational young adult tale that follows initially 2 sisters who are Bengali but lived in England and are now moving to the United States in the 70s. This is a beautiful story. I loved it very much, and I'm going to do the content warnings before I forget. Content warnings include racism, colorism, and death of a parent. Every single perspective in here felt so very well-rounded and distinct. It also helps that the audiobook is like full cast. Each perspective character has their own narrator, and that made this feel even more like fully rounded. Getting to follow the sisters and then the sisters' daughters as well was really interesting, because you kind of have an idea of how someone's life will shake out, and seeing those things change was really interesting. And I just loved the character progression and arcs in here. I'm honestly shocked that this is sold as YA because of another perspective character that we follow, and like their progression is the most significant. I really enjoyed the sense of humor and the writing itself. There's a really like little bit of a tongue-in-cheek way that it's written. The prose itself I thought was really, really beautiful. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. This is my first 5-star read that is not fantasy this year. I loved it. If you like young adults, contemporary, or like coming of age stuff, I definitely think this is worth a read. I'm still debating whether or not I'm going to do a review for this, so I think I might be a little bit shorter on my thoughts on here, but I read Malice by John Gwynne A lot of people in like the fantasy communities that I follow have been talking about this series as a whole a lot, and I like bit the bullet. It was time for me to finally read it. This is a very stereotypical fantasy setting, like one big kingdom, but like kings rule like little sections of it. Politicking has happened, and like the old gods and like bad entities are slowly rising again, and groups of people in here have to rise against that or the world will end. The story itself I thought was enjoyable, but it's definitely a setup book. It takes a long time to get rolling, and you just kind of have to be ready and okay with the fact that it's slow. There are a lot of perspective characters. I would argue too many, especially in the beginning, but I liked the progression of where things went. I specifically liked two character arcs that were definite like foils to one another, and watching those two develop was a highlight of the story. The prose itself I didn't care for. I don't think it's bad. It's just it's dense. I ended up giving this 3.75 out of 5 stars. I couldn't quite give it the 4, but I am very excited to continue on with the series, and I might do a full review for this. I then fully on a whim decided to reread a series that I didn't intend to reread this year, but I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I need something at work that doesn't like take up all my brain power. So I decided to reread Percy Jackson. I didn't read them in succession, but it just makes sense for me to talk about them back to back. So this is The Lightning Thief and this is Sea of Monsters. They hold up surprisingly well, mostly. They hold up mostly well. The sense of humor is ridiculous, but it's middle grade, and I like the tongue-in-cheek way that this is written. I really like Percy as a main character. He is a great main character. His progression is great. I like how Rick actually, I call him Rick as if I know him, Rick Riordan really shows when Percy is in the wrong, and his development through each book is something that I think is honestly very satisfying and exciting. And the nostalgia man, I haven't read these books in years. I would say probably at least 10 years, and they hold up surprisingly well. Content warnings for that include bullying, and there is a slur that I have not seen in Sea of Monsters that I have not seen written in fiction in a long time. It is the R slur, and it was a bit of like a he directly combats that, and he's like, you can't say that. It was like a, oh my god. I really, not even done talking about them. I really like them. I gave this one 4 stars and this one 3 stars, which actually are in line with my original ratings. This next book I read was out of my comfort zone. It's one of the books that I'm pushing myself to read this year, like my 20 to read in 2021. To mixed results. I really thought I would like it more, and that's The Mothers by Britt Bennett. This is literary fiction, which is very much outside my wheelhouse. It follows 2 main perspective girls who are at the start of the book are like teenagers and grappling with the loss of their respective mothers. One has just committed suicide, and the other one is just not a good mother. She kind of abandons her kid or doesn't put her kid's well-being first, and they kind of connect on that, and you follow them growing up. Content warnings for this include suicide, pregnancy and abortion, sexual assault, child abuse and rape, ableism, and chronic pain. If you are sensitive to abortion in any way, I wouldn't recommend reading this book. This follows characters, a lot of them who don't agree with abortion, and while I don't think the author herself is saying that abortion is bad, like there's a lot of characters that are saying some like hurtful things, but I do understand. I've seen a lot of 1-star reviews that don't like it for that reason, and I can't blame anyone for that. I just didn't like where the story went. It felt like such a mundane thing that happens in the second half, and I was just like, come on, really? That's where we're going with this? But I did like the first half. I thought the first half was strong, and following the 2 girls and their struggles and how they're almost envious of the other and how they both are missing their mothers. I like the writing. The prose was really nice. There were really beautiful phrases that I caught on to even when I was listening to the audiobook. I didn't understand the point of the story other than to get across that relationships, friendships, life is hard and like people make bad choices sometimes. Such a mundane reason for like things to go wrong, and I was just like bored by it. I gave it 3 stars. Writing was nice. I'm very interested in reading Britt Bennon's second book that like hit the scene last year and kind of took the world by storm. I think I will enjoy that. The final book I completed in April, I'm going to quickly talk about because I'm actually going to be filming my review literally after I film this. So you'll get my full thoughts on it there if you're interested. But I, on a whim, read Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo, entirely separate from the fact that the show was premiering. I fully forgot. I picked it up like a few days before and I was like, oh, I'm going to be reading this while watching this show. I view them as entirely separate entities, and I think that's the best way to do it. But I was very disappointed in King of Scars. I gave it 3 stars. And I really liked Rule of Wolves, and I'm shocked. I thought the political stuff, the way it came together, was really satisfying. I was happy with most of the character arcs. There are a couple plot quibbles that I just don't think were necessary. I still kind of resent the entrance of a certain character, but I'm less mad at it now than what I was in the first book of this series. Content warnings, before I forget, include abuse, death, violence, blood and gore, and grief. I'm going to discuss this in my review, and I'll have it linked down below when it goes live if you're interested, but I was shocked and impressed, and I gave it 4 stars. I'm actually like pretty happy with the way that this series concluded. Those are all the books I read in why do I keep forgetting what month it was? April. It's still technically April. It's April 30th when I'm filming this. Kind of a mixed bag. Didn't have any like poorly rated things, but a lot of like 3-star stuff too. It was a weird month. Let me know down in the comments below like your favorite read of April, and if you have any thoughts on any of the books I mentioned, I would love to know down in the comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.